I am here with Sarah Preston, who I trained with at drama school. So she's a friend of very long standing.
Mhm.
And she is an actor, writer, director, and founder of Bamboo Media Productions, whose mission is to particularly support women in their work from the northeast of England. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you very much for having me. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's lovely to see you as well. So, before we started recording, Sarah and I were talking about actually, I kind of want to call it the right to speak. So we were talking about just even showing up on a podcast and the thoughts that go
Mhm.
through your mind. What will I say? Will it be of benefit? Who am I to be speaking here? And so I'd asked Sarah, how is that for you when you've been putting your work out in the world? Because you have been. And so clearly it takes a lot of courage to do that. And you were starting to talk about that.
Yeah, in one word is scary. Um, as you know, I've been developing the projects for a number of years, especially this specific one called the uncertainty principle, which is set in the Northeast, which is part of the remit, as you're saying, about the company bringing things to regions that have global appeal and serving them positively, and especially centering female centric in terms of the acting and the crew and heads of departments. So, but yeah, it's been an evolving thing, definitely. And I've had to come from a place of sitting in my bedroom typing away, going, "Is anyone ever going to see this? Should anyone ever see it?" Um, to a place where I'm having to constantly now network and go to events and take part in events. And I've been lucky to do some really good training with like Creative UK and people like that. And having to have the elevator pitch ready and speaking to people and talking about it. But as we were talking about earlier on before we started about feeling legitimate in that way,
Mm-hmm.
it took a long time for me to actually get from a place of, I'd say, having it in my head and then getting to the where I was talking to, heads of CEOs of some of the major distributors and things and chatting about it. So that was a huge, massive journey. And the first time I actually said it out loud and what I was doing was a momentous occasion. And then every little time is a little bit more of a win and a bit more of a win. But I have to really bolster myself, take stock, and go, right, okay, this is what I need to say. I have to rehearse things over and over again. I can't wing it. So it's been an interesting learning curve because I've come from a place of feeling incredibly disempowered and very shy. As you know, I was always
Mm-hmm.
labeled shy. I couldn't talk to anybody. I couldn't talk to anybody new. Um, to a place where I go, right, if I'm going into an event or something, I'll say, okay, I just have to talk to one new person tonight and then I can go home.
Mm-hmm.
But invariably, I talk to somebody else and then somebody else. And now I'm actually enjoying it. I actually enjoy talking to people. And it kind of makes me think, oh God, all those years I've missed out on actually conversing with people and hearing people's stories and things. So I love listening to people and I love listening to people's life stories and things like that and what makes them tick and things. So it was a bit kind of a bit yes, not sad, but it was thinking of all the things that I'd kind of missed out on.
That's that's really to the point of a lot of the people who come to me, some of whom are struggling with shyness and some of whom are not. But I'm really interested in you touching on mindset because clearly I can hear in your story that there's a conversation that you have with yourself that before the events or ongoing. You touched with me on the spiritual right before we started
Mhm.
recording as part of your development. And I'd love to hear more about that, about how you get yourself to be able to do this and now you enjoy it, even if you still feel shy, it sounds like.
Mm. Yeah, it's a constant battle, kind of going in and out of it. And I do reach a saturation point sometimes. I feel like a battery kind of, I get drained, and if it's going off to the bathroom, for 5-10 minutes, and just sitting there, just collecting myself, because there is a limited amount of energy I can serve in a room full of people. I find it very draining. Even though I
Mm-hmm.
enjoy it initially, there's a tipping point, and I start to feel really drained. Um, I think a lot of introverts kind of feel that way. But yeah, the development I've gone is again a huge, massive, long journey. And I have a good friend, June Lenny Lane, who's a spiritual teacher, and we've been friends for many years. But there's a group of us who've grown and developed and moved on, and other people have come. But there's been a central kind of group of people, and just a place, and it's like a tribe where we come and spout all our things that we kind of issues that we have, and she gives us tools to work through those things, and obviously other things that I've been researching as well. But I think the spiritual and the personal identity for me go hand in hand. And it's not that I label myself a spiritual person or religious or anything like that. I'm open to all possibilities of what's out there. But the work I've been doing is specifically about how to take those unhelpful patterns that we've had in our past and bring them to the light and go, okay, I'm examining that.
Mm-hmm.
What's helpful of that? What's not helpful? And if it's not helpful, is to work through it and to drop it and to let it go, and then you
Mm.
can move on to something else. And I feel whereas humans, we're ever growing and ever evolving into more I don't want to say better, that's not the right word, more aware beings as we go
Mm-hmm.
on. So every day try to strive to be a little bit more aware and a little bit more cognizant of what I'm doing, and why I'm doing it.
Yes.
So writing has been really interesting because it's given me the platform to do all that and to exercise myself through the writing and experience myself through the writing and how it goes out into the world, and having people read it and having comments come back, and embodying those, working on it, doing it again. So it's extremely exposing. But by the same token, I feel as a creative, I don't know whether you feel this when you write as well, that I almost feel like it's coming through me. It's not of me.
Yes,
I'm like the filter.
absolutely.
It comes, especially when you're in the flow and you're in the moment and you're writing and you just don't know what you're writing and you're in that flow state. I very much subscribe to the feeling that it's another kind of entity almost that comes through you, and we, through our experience, shape it, and through our lens, put our spin on it, and it comes out into the world. I don't know if you find that as well.
I do, absolutely. I used to, I think, solely work like that. And dare I say, I think it's a more typically sort of feminine energy way of working. Um, to to be receptive and sort of let something come through as opposed to
Mm,
imposing structure from the beginning.
mm,
And then I found that after the first pass, I think, oh, this is what I'm talking about. I can see it, and then it helps me to become more structural. I've found it helps me to become more structural after allowing myself to be creative. So I've
mm,
actually come in my work to be more conscious about what I'm writing in a way that I wasn't initially. And I think there's just so many different ways that we can do it.
mm,
Certainly,
mm,
when I first put my work out, my writing work into the world in workshop form or rehearsed readings, it would feel terribly vulnerable because, in some way, I hadn't yet, as a younger writer, analyzed what I was writing about. So it would
mm.
be there in front of me with other people around. And there's this tremendous sense of, oh my goodness, I'm exposing
What are
this
you looking
part
at?
of
Everyone's
myself.
looking at me.
But maybe people don't actually see it that way. It's just that we know, I think, just as actors, we're using ourselves. But the audience, unless people know us well, they won't know what of ourselves is in that performance, I think.
Yeah, I think it's any art, isn't it? You've got to bring a bit of yourself to it. As an actor, every character you portray, there's an aspect of yourself you can't not. Excuse me. And yeah, it's having that. I think, yeah, I think when you get attached to something, if you're attached to something, that's when you've got the ego involved. And I think there's a bit of a blockage there, but it's if you create in the flow state and you
Mm.
and you create in not in flow. I think when you're not in flow, that's when it becomes the personal attachment and ego, not ego as in big headed, the true sense of
Mm-hmm.
ego word. Um, and that's when your feelings can get damaged or whatever. Um,
Yes. I like feedback. I like
mm,
discovering often in a process, oh, I don't need that. I need to cut that. Something I might have been very attached to, because ultimately I want the whole thing to work and to speak to people. And so often the things that I've been really hanging on to may be the things that the piece doesn't need. And there's this tremendous
mm,
sense of relief I've sometimes had in receiving the kind of feedback that helps me understand why, and then being able to let go of that because it's
mm.
in the way of the whole.
Yeah. Was it, I don't know who said it, but something about that when they, is it called Killing Your Darlings, where that you have, if there's lines that you really, really like, and you're, oh, it's really funny, or it's a really good line or a really good scene, and usually those ones you're going to have to cut because, as you say, they're just so not congruent with the rest of the piece or something.
Right.
It's just like a blockage thing. I remember reading that first, I was going, no, but so these lines are really good, and don't cut them. And
In
but
isolation, they're really good, right?
yeah,
They sort
yeah,
of
but
serve
just not right for the piece.
a
Yeah.
pet desire you might have, but you really want the whole thing to shine.
Hmm.
As I've been listening to you, what really strikes me, I'm an introvert as well, but I think that most people seeing me online wouldn't know that unless I say it.
Hmm.
And you talked about feeling drained and having to go off to the bathroom to sort of not be talking to someone at events.
Hmm.
I am so like that. And it has a lot to do also, the bigger the event, the harder for me. And what I've just recently identified is it's when I don't have a role. So I'm
Okay.
at a huge event and there's no particular role. I just want to leave.
Hmm.
If I know what my, putting it in modern speak, if I know what my why is, and
Hmm.
also my role, I'm teaching a group of students right now and absolutely loving it. They'd never look at me and go, she's an introvert. I'm leading, I'm dynamic, I'm expressive. But I feel very nourished by that class. But at the same time, I don't want to do anything else for the rest of the day. And I think that there's a misinterpretation around introversion as being that you're always going to want to be very quiet or you're not social. And you're
Yeah.
talking about being social, being in a group and receiving support from the group, reaching out to other women, promoting other women,
Hmm.
receiving support from other women yourself. And so that's all very social. And I think it may have to do with the fact that introverts, although I know extroverts who do this too, so I'm not saying it's only introverts, like to go very deep into the one on one with
Yeah.
someone. And so it can be very tiring to almost not be able to do that or to
Hmm.
have to repeatedly do it because there's quite a lot of investment and energy in the output that might recharge an extrovert, but that ultimately will deplete an introvert.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would go with that. That I would rather, like you say, have a really deep one-to-one conversation for hours than multiple surface conversations and kind of typical networking conversations. That I find very draining because I have to think consciously. I have to think left brain. Whereas if you're in a deep conversation, it's right brain, you're in flow again, so that you've got that access and it's the easier energy, isn't it? So that makes total sense. Yeah. It would be a lot easier to do the one on one.
Yeah, I think because we have social media and we have so many different people speaking about their niche interest, there's now a lot more of an online exploration. I'm following an account on Instagram called Hush Loudly, and I love what they post about introverts and extroverts. And it's not making value judgment about either, but it's coming from the introvert perspective.
Mm.
Hush Loudly, I think, is a really interesting
Title.
title for that. I
Mm.
want to ask you because it feels that there's something here about why women from the Northeast, and if there's anything about being a woman from the Northeast that made you feel women from the Northeast need to be supported in a particular way. I'm not questioning that, but simply wanting to bring it out because much of my audience are in the States. They won't have any association with that region. So could you speak to that a bit more?
Sure. So the northeast of England is what we call one of the regions. So there's always has been a north-south divide in the UK, and south is generally considered London, even though there's southern counties as well. It's usually London, and then anything above, what we call anything above Watford Gap, which is not too many miles outside of London, is the north. But particularly the northeast it's um, it's particularly seen as and portrayed as working class, what we call working class. Obviously, got the class system here in the UK, so the working class. So it's being unfavorably reported and unfavorably being expressed, as should we say. That's not to say there are people struggling in the northeast, but obviously I'm from there originally. I came down to London in the early 90s to go to RADA with your good self, and it was a completely different world. I do love it down south, but I also equally love the northeast. It's a region where everybody's extremely proud to come from the northeast. It's a very sort of tough place that people get on with stuff. Where we're quite as a body of people are quite tough and straightforward, but also really friendly and
Mm-hmm.
really welcoming. And that was one of the first things coming down to London. It was, everybody where you'd go in Middlesbrough, not that I ever did because I was so shy, but everyone would talk to everybody. You'd get on the
Right.
bus or something and everyone would be like, chatting away. And I came to London and it was just like ghost town. You get on a
Oh
tube,
gosh, yes.
nobody was looking at it, nobody was even looking at anybody. And I was so there was massive differences. So I wanted to take something intelligent and positive back to the northeast and high end and film it there, set it there, film it there, and create a creative hub in the northeast. And it just so happens that in the last few years there's been the bodies like the BBC and the government, etc., where they're doing this new levelling up scheme. And there's been a lot of money pumped into the area because it's a creative area. There's been nothing. So it's great. And it's amazing timing that it's all kind of coming to fruition at the same time. But as you know, there's a lack of females in the industry, both in front and behind the camera. Like appallingly bad behind the camera, even more so.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a lack of crew in general in the country because there's more and more filming. And when filming of other things start in the northeast, there is a lack of crew. So that coupled with a lack of female crew, so I thought, right, what I would like to do is bring apprenticeships, mentorships, and bring women from the area, new and returning people in the industry who have either moved back there or want to get started in the industry to come and do some on-set practical apprenticeships with the shows that we're going to be doing. So, and to give people training on set, and then they can go out into the industry. And hopefully the shows that I'm developing, I'm going to be filming, are returnable series, so they'll be there, all year round. And there's some new studios there. There's the Northern Studios that have been built in Hartlepool, and also they're hopefully going to build massive studios in Sunderland called Fulwell Kane Studios, which is going to be huge. So if that happens, there's going to absolutely be a need to fulfill that with crew and people in all the ancillary businesses working around it as well. So hopefully it's going to be a really exciting time for the Northeast. It'll take a few years, but a really exciting time that people who want to be in the creative industry can do it and live there and stay there. I had to move away. I had to move to London. There was nothing in the Northeast. It's a region that's been forgotten about, really. So it's great to see it all returning, and I'm really, really happy to be part of the push. And hopefully, we'll build something sustainable and long lasting.
It's so exciting that you started this before and now you're part of, you can see yourself
Yeah.
as part of a growing movement for that region. I'd love to ask you now a less empowered moment with voice that you'd like to
Mm.
share with us.
Yeah, less empowered moment. I think the one that's always stuck out to me um, was um, was at RADA, and we were doing Trojan Women. I was playing Helena Troy.
And I was in that production, by the way, with
You
you.
you were in that production. Were you one of the women that I trounced? I had such a horrific time being able to speak. I don't know if you're aware, when I was at RADA, I had issues. I had issues, challenges for having a centered voice. And there was only certain times where it became centered and certain times, and it was either when I was ill and had a cold and my voice dropped down there somewhere. And everyone was like, "Oh, you got a sexy voice." And I'm like, "Great, thanks. It's good when I'm ill, thanks." Or it was if I'd had a drink, because the drink and alcohol obviously relax my vocal cords in a certain way, or probably relax my body as well. But I've always had, say, challenges with centering my voice.
Mm.
And I didn't realize at the time, but it stemmed from my neck, from an
Yes.
accident I had as a child. And when I came out abroad, I worked and I did a series called Holby City. And in the first season, I was one of the recurring characters, so I could see the journey of my voice. And the episode before and after I had my first osteopathy appointment, my voice is up here and talking like this. And then the next episode, it's centered, and it's so auditorily, I won't say visible, it's not the right word. It was so apparent on screen. I was like, wow. So, and over the years, I've obviously had lots more treatments and osteopathy and chiropractic, and my neck's kind of extended and still not a normal a normal curve, but it's got a lot better. So now, but I still have to work it and relax. And I think a lot of it is also tied into high functioning anxiety, which I never realized I had until earlier this year. Um, and so that relaxing of the voice. So when I was at RADA doing this piece, it was the height of that cyclical thing of not having the voice to support, and then being challenged to do that in the piece. I had this speech to Agamemnon, and it started with the word "oh, oh, Agamemnon." Even now, it makes me go, "Oh." And when I see the word "oh" in the script, it gives me the shivers.
Is that because
Because
you've learned to deliver the O?
yeah, well, kind of, but it still
Yeah.
makes me go, "oh," because I couldn't say "oh." I was going, "Oh, oh, oh, Agamemnon." I just couldn't do it. And the more I couldn't do it, the directors are looking at me going, "Really? You're at RADA, dear." And the more it was that and the mindset and the mind got in the way then. And the more I couldn't do it, the more I got anxiety over it. The more anxiety or panic, should we say, the worse it got. And I was so closed off through the whole process. I was just in absolute bits with it. And bless him, Doug, shout out to Dougal Bruce Lockhart. Duke, who was playing Agamemnon opposite me, he took me aside, and because the character is quite sexual, and I hadn't got a clue. And I was 20, two, whatever, 23. I hadn't got a clue. So bless him, he was like, "Screw them all, with your voice. They've told me this, that, and the other, and it's a lot of rubbish. And just he said, you're okay. This is fine. Whatever happens, it's fine." And we did an A to Z mapping out of the scene, and he gave me specific movements, so I had the confidence within those movements to think, okay, I can do this physically and portray the character through these movements. And when I'd done that, I felt more settled, and I was able to kind of relax into doing the voice. And I was able to do it on, I think, I can't quite remember whether I got it correct, really, if I was able to do it really well, but I got to a stage where I could perform, and I enjoyed it once I was performing. But the rehearsal, it was horrible, absolutely horrible. I was just in a blind panic about not being able to say "oh." I mean, how crazy is that?
Understandable, because you would have been aware that that's a very open vowel and it's calling on the voice to deliver in a large way. Open
Yeah.
vowels don't let us hide,
Yeah,
I
I
think.
still find it. Yeah, still challenged by it, but yeah.
Well, I love the way that you point to using the physical to work through something that's
Mm.
become emotional. And also the importance of the body in a larger way. So it's not just about what's happening here.
Mm-hmm.
If we can focus on physical actions, that can help to release us. And I see that very much with public speaking coaching, is that the emphasis on what you're doing with your mouth, how you're breathing, and then how you're moving brings you into the body, and the body is doing the motions of confidence or impact, emphasis. If we just try to do it with the mind, now I need to feel relaxed and confident, we're not going to get anywhere
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because the mind has gotten caught in a loop. So the body can lead us into greater freedom by simply choosing to do something with it.
Yeah.
And what Doug was helping you do was that. And I love that
Mm.
story about him, which I'd never heard before.
Have you not? No.
No, of
Mm.
course not.
Yeah,
but I think
yeah,
it's
he
lovely to
saved
think
me.
of
He's
him.
absolutely saved me on that show. Yeah.
And I feel like he's quite an embodied person, just remembering him
Mm.
from that time, that there's sort of a weight to his physical presence. So perhaps even at that young age, he had a sense of, well, let's just do this
Mm.
because of who he is.
Yeah, it's no thing. He's done directing as well, which is no, it's I can see that because yeah, he just gave me that confidence. And like you say, having that structure to sit into, and we do, don't we? If we do poses, it actually changes the chemical makeup in our brain, doesn't it? It makes us gives us kind of confidence if we do the body and
Exactly.
the Wonder Woman pose and stuff, isn't it? Now, isn't it really funny? Because I really struggled to come up with anything. I thought, when has there been a time where I've felt really empowered with my voice? And I can't think of one. I can't think of one specific moment or where I've been able to say something other than the cumulative effect of what I was saying earlier of just being able to speak more and um, just having a sense of worthiness, of
Mm-hmm.
having that old chestnut of self-worth. Am I good enough? Are people going to want to hear what I've got to say? So for so many years I didn't, but I have got better. And I think for me is as well is my accent. I feel more empowered because I'm now embracing my accent again, because I'm sure you're aware through RADA it was discouraged to have an accent. To have it in your toolbox with RP and everything else, and Scottish and Manchester and Irish and American, have it as a tool, but it was discouraged because it was looked down on. There's certain stereotypical things that come with certain accents in the industry and the world at large. So it was, you're never going to work in things like Shakespeare, for example, if you've got a northern accent, unless you're playing one of the working class characters. You'd never be one of the kings or the queens if you're doing it in a northern accent. It has changed. It has changed enormously across the board, and it's fantastic. And you hear voiceovers with regional accents, and you see it in programs. And this thing about filming in the regions, they want to bring more productions to the regions, which is brilliant. Which is what we're looking to do, is to film regional shows that have the global appeal. So it's great that people outside of the UK as well are getting to hear accents. So I know a lot of times people would ask me if I was Irish or Scottish
I've
or
got that
Welsh.
too. Occasionally
Have you?
Irish here in the States
Yeah.
because my accent is frequently somewhat transatlantic, and the Irish
Mm-hmm.
accent developed. The American
Yeah.
accent very much was a foundation.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the Irish. Yeah. I'm now learning to embrace the accent because it's more acceptable,
I like
mutually.
accents that have a lot of texture. And what do I mean by that? I don't know. But I love it when you lean into your accent because it's rich. It is rich, regardless of what you
Mm.
feel about the intonation. It's not monotonal or boring, or to my ear, it's rich.
I think that's probably more to do with how I've felt about myself in the past, and that thing about speaking out and you know thinking that people don't want to listen to what you've got to say. So I
Right.
just kind of go and hide in this corner and not speak to anybody.
Well, what I hear about your most empowered moment, and that you couldn't really pinpoint one, is that you're in a process of daily empowerment, and that it's a step by
Mm,
step and step by step, and it's how you're moving in the world rather than one startling moment.
mm,
I think we don't have to achieve this moment of constant freedom. I think we just have to keep leaning into greater empowerment every day and be aware of it. I think that's all that we need to do. And you're challenging
mm,
yourself all the time, and that's empowering. You've decided that it's something you can do. You can challenge yourself and get support, and that's a life worth living in my
mm,
view.
mm. Yeah, challenging. That's a good word.
Whose voice do you love and why?
Ooh, I love Elvis.
I can see why.
I never realized how much until I went and saw the film. I think for me, it's not so much the speaking voice, even though I think he's got a really lovely speaking voice. It's the singing voice for me. I find singing voices that's what gets me. Um, and with him, he's just, as people have spoken about before, I think he's got that connection and flow when he gets it right. When you hear him, it's really interesting when you hear him singing multiple takes and you get to the one and you go, ah, that's the one. He's just hit the flow and hit the energy. Even though he's doing great takes, there's just that one where he's really connected. And it feels like he's singing to you and all the rest of it. And I just think he had the most incredible connection to his voice and to, as we were talking about earlier, something other that comes through and this creative expression comes through him. Um, I could listen to his voice all day. It just comforts me and just relaxes me, especially his earlier stuff. Yeah, but I'm a sucker for the American accent as well. I grew up on American TV and
Of
film,
course, it makes
all
so much
my
sense.
all my heroes and actors that I liked or whatever were all American. So yeah, I do
That's
like
great
American
for people
accents.
to hear as well, I think.
Yeah.
So, do you have a question for me?
Well, I do. It's kind of following on from what we just talked about. Really, was what was your favorite film or TV show as you were growing up? Why and what influence does it have on you now?
Oh, gosh. It's interesting. I don't have a favorite, but
Or
I
maybe a
can tell
genre?
you more about a film. It was more about film. So, I watched Raiders of the Lost Ark 8 times. I think you'll relate to this
Yeah.
because I wanted to be Indiana Jones. I've
Right.
heard you talk about that sense of wanting to be the hero, wanting to
Mm-hmm.
be, and at that time as girls, we didn't have any female role models that were the heroes.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's different. But so I realized that I had pictures of Harrison Ford all over my wall, and I realized that a lot of my kind of being drawn to him as an actor was so much actually about wanting to be the roles that he played. Those films were really key for me
Mm-hmm.
in my wanting to be a bit of an adventurer. And I am in a quiet way. I'm very open to new experiences and keep developing myself and what I'm interested in. And I think it's that spirit of adventure, but also wanting to travel more, wanting to just go and
Mm-hmm.
immerse in another place. Where can people find you, Sarah, and your work online?
Um, the production company is Bamboo Media Productions, and I I'm most prevalent on Instagram, although I've been very slack of late. I have this love-hate relationship with social media. I love looking at other people's stuff and journeys that people go on, but yeah, I suppose it's part of my thing of putting myself out there a bit more. So your Instagram is Sarah Jane Preston, the two main places.
And I will put links in the notes Thank you so much for speaking with me today. It's been really delightful.